Okay, let's get to it. Has it seriously been a month already? So I'm recording this February 1st, first day out of dry January, and I cannot believe that Christmas was over a month ago. This is crazy. But welcome back to the Whiskey Noobs podcast. If you guys don't know me, my name is Chris, and I am the host of the show. If you're new here, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I'm hoping we start getting some more new people since we're back to recording this regularly. Because, when you quit for 6 months, I shouldn't say quit, when you pause for 6 months, you tend to lose some of your viewership. That's all right, though. I really appreciate those of you who are still here, and, this time around, I've really structured it in a way that I really enjoy doing it, and that's not to say I don't enjoy interviews, because maybe we'll get back to those, but I'm rambling. What do we got going on today? We got American Single Malts today. And once again, I should mention this, I'm not wearing headphones if you're not watching the video version, so I'm really hoping I keep a fairly consistent distance to the microphone. If it gets bad, I will go back to wearing headphones. I just don't like them. They mess up, what's left of my hair. Today we're talking about American Single Malts. We're going to talk about what they are, because somewhat recently, the government has finally passed some legislation to dictate what American Single Malts are. We're going to talk about what they are and which ones you should buy, and what I mean by that is, of course, we're going to do a blind tasting. So I've got my biases towards specific brands, but I'm going to do this blind, and we're going to see. And I haven't had any for over a week, I think, so the odds of me recognizing one are looking pretty slim. So we're going to do a blind tasting and talk about which one I like the most, and of course we're going to talk about what American Single Malts actually are. And then at the end, we've got some Patreon questions, so I'm going to do some Q&As here at the end. Those come from the patrons on Patreon, I should say. So thank you guys so much for supporting the show. If you want to submit your own questions, you can join the Patreon. Please, I just request, my only request from you is you go check it out. You just go see what I'm offering. And if you're not interested, I totally understand. Just give a rating or review to the show. That's helpful too. But you'll probably notice, this show is right now fully supported by the Patreon page. I don't have any ads or anything, and I'm looking to keep it that way. And I've added to the Patreon, if you're hitting 15-second skip, I recommend stopping now. You might want to hear this. We've added giveaways every month to the Patreon page. So this month, I'm giving not this month, the close of this month. You're listening to this probably the same day that I'm drawing the names. I'm giving away a Blanton's straight from the barrel, and that is thanks to my friends at Bonded Bottle Shop. This isn't an official like sponsored ad in the podcast, but they are officially my partner that's helping me with that, and I appreciate the heck out of them for that. It's bondedbottleshop.com, and we're giving away one bottle from their shop every month on the Patreon page. So I'm going to try to keep it to the rarest and best bottles that I can get my hands on. So you're going to want to go check that out. You get different numbers of entries depending on what tier you are on the Patreon page. So that's a new update. And I got to say, thank you so much to everybody who joined the Patreon. I'm trying to scoop my chair and talk at the same time. There we go. I got to say thank you so much to everybody who joined the Patreon page, because the fact that we're already able to do these giveaways, my plan for this episode was to explain if we get more people, I'll start doing the giveaways. But we've maxed out the top tier of the Patreon page. I'm working on creating more free gifts so that I can open up more for that tier. So by the time you're listening to this, there's probably more slots available for the max tier. And I recommend you go check it out. Okay, that's my plug for the Patreon page. I gotta put it in there because that's like our sponsor of the show. Let's talk about American Single Malts, though. I feel like American Single Malts don't get the love that they deserve, and that's why I wanted to dedicate this episode to them. That, and because they passed the legislation for it. I love American Single Malts, and I think perhaps they don't get the love that they deserve because people look at it as like a marketing thing from the liquor world. Bourbon, it had a bubble when American Single Malts came out, and it looks like that bubble is either popping or just kind of deflating a little bit. But I think people looked at it as, they know the bourbon bubble's going to pop, so they're coming out with something new. Another big part of it was, bourbon has to be aged in brand new charred oak barrels, and American Single Malts don't, and that, or at least at the time, they definitely didn't, because there wasn't many rules when they first came out with them. And, that was kind of a thought, is like, we can use some reused barrels, because it's kind of wasteful to just burn through all these brand new barrels. So There was a lot of reasons. There was a lot of reasons that American Single Malt really started to have this kind of marketing hype behind it. And I think, at least in my opinion, when you see marketing hype like that, I know this happened for me a little bit, you kind of think they're just trying to push a new product to keep me interested. And I think I felt that way about American Single Malts for a little while. Okay, my tablet just went into full freak out mode, so there's probably a hard cut there for a second because this tablet's pretty old. This is why you need to join the Patreon page, people. My equipment is failing me. Okay. Anyhow, we're back. We're back in action. So I felt the same way about American Single Malts, where I wasn't too sure about them. Thought maybe they were being pushed on us. And then we had Amanda Beckwith on from Virginia Distillery Company. And that really helped me have more of an appreciation. I really saw how she viewed it as art, and that really made me like, okay, there's definitely something to these American Single Malts. And then I had Virginia Distillery Company. I started having Westward. I had some other one-off brands, a couple of which I really enjoyed that we're going to talk about with this blind tasting. And I started to be like, okay, you know what? There's something to this American Single Malt. And especially I started seeing there's a lot that don't really taste like scotch. And I think we might think of it as like America trying to take the scotch market, which I think there's some brands who that's basically what they're doing. They're like, let's make it taste like good scotch. But there's a lot of brands that are going a totally different direction. They're like, what kind of weird flavors can we get? We have a totally different climate than Scotland. So what kind of strange flavors can we get? And I really appreciate that. And that's why I wanted to take a moment to really spotlight American Single Malts, because I really personally enjoy them. Actually, today's the first day that's not Dry January, and I broke Dry January with an American Single Malt. I went with Jack Daniel's American Single Malt that's aged in Oloroso sherry casks. Yeah, Oloroso casks, I believe. And ironically, so I had that. I actually drank it. I didn't spit it out. And now I'm going to do a tasting where I'm going to spit them all out because it's a tasting of 4. And so I'm really working on drinking less, because I've mentioned plenty of times I don't need to beat this dead horse. But the more reviews you do, the more you got to be careful about how much it is that you're actually drinking. Okay. So that's my little marketing plug for American Single Malts. I'm not selling anything. I don't own any American Single Malt brands, I promise you. I just really like them. I'm a fan. And so let's talk about what they are. First of all, it took a long time to get here. So I mentioned, if it was not in the part that I cut out, which I don't think it is, when my tablet decided to go full freak out mode, I mentioned it was like the Wild West for American Single Malts. They were a category that was being made, and they were all trying to follow generally the same rules. And they didn't know what the legal definition was going to end up being. So it was kind of the Wild West. And it took a long time, but finally the TTB decided, okay, we made a decision. And this was on December 18th of 2024. The TTB made a decision, and that decision was effective January 19th. So about a month ago, as of the time that you're listening to this. If you're listening to this when it first comes out. If you're listening to this years from now. 2025 is what I'm talking about. January 19th of 2025. So here's the thing, though. These rules that I'm about to tell you, there's a 5-year grace period for American Single Malt to transition. If they don't fully comply yet, they have some time. Because as I said, there's people who built their whole brands with these blends, and if they fall outside of these rules that I'm about to give you, they can't just be like, oh, well, now I have to change all my labels and I'm not an American Single Malt. I'm just this weird American whiskey thing. So they're giving this 5-year grace period to slowly kind of change that, which I think is really, it makes sense. People might be upset about it. I personally think that it makes sense. I don't know if people are upset about it. I'm just saying I could see people being upset about it. People get upset about everything these days, thanks to the internet. So let me take a drink of water and we're going to talk about this. Water. I have a much better relationship with it now. At the end of Dry January, I'm like, yeah, you get a lot less heartburn when you drink water instead of whiskey. And here's the thing. I didn't drink whiskey in high volumes like people tend to think that I do, but I drank it consistently enough that I just had heartburn like all the time. Another reason that I'm going to try to cut back on my drinking. All right. What's it take to be an American Single Malt as of January 19th, 2025? First of all, you need to be mashed, distilled, and aged in the United States. This should be no surprise to anybody. That means that all your ingredients, mashed means all your ingredients need to be put together and fermented in the United States. Distilled, if you don't know what distilling is, that's basically they take that fermented mash and they heat it up, take the evaporated vapors, and they cool those down to make it into the liquid that we call whiskey. And it needs to be aged, needs to be put into barrels and aged in the United States. No surprise there. It's got American in the name. Then it needs to be distilled at one distillery. This is an important one because this is a common misconception with single malt scotch whiskey. When we say single malt, people think the single means that there's only malted barley in it. And there is only malted barley in single malt. But what the single actually means is it's distilled at one single distillery. And now you're probably saying, what do you mean? I thought everything was distilled at one distillery. Not necessarily. So a lot of the blended whiskeys, especially the sourced brands, the NDPs, the non-distiller producers, if I'm remembering that correctly, they buy from a bunch of different distilleries. Then they blend those together, and then they bottle it. And this could be anything. This could be bourbon. This could be not American Single Malt because it's from a bunch of different distilleries. But it could be rye whiskeys. It could be just weird American whiskey finishes, these hybrid things. That's very common practice. And even, some brands where they own multiple distilleries, they might pull from multiple different distilleries. So a lot of times, not a lot of times, sometimes what you're getting is a blend from different distilleries. So what they're saying with American Single Malt, because it's got the single in that name, is it can only come from one distillery. You'll notice on a lot of scotches, it might be a blended scotch whiskey. That would mean that it doesn't conform with the rules of single malt, so it might not be 100% malted barley, or it could be, but it's coming from multiple different distilleries. So that's just something to keep in mind. I think that's something for me that I didn't notice for a super long time, is that there's a lot of blending going on, and there's a lot of blending even within one distillery where you're blending different barrels together into batches. So with American Single Malt, a single distillery. Also, you have to be distilled to 160 proof or less. You're going to see this across the board with a lot of different whiskeys where there's a top proof point that you can't distill beyond. I think it's 160 for bourbon, but don't quote me on that. It's been a long time since I looked at those rules. But 160 proof means you're 80% alcohol by volume, which means you can't distill it to where it's almost pure alcohol because you want to make sure it retains some of the flavor. So that's the purpose for that rule, and you see it in a lot of different categories. Of course, it needs to be 100% malted barley in the mash bill, which you would expect with a name like single malt, and it needs to be stored in oak barrels. Important distinguishing factor here. They can be used. They can be charred. According to what I saw, they can be uncharred as well, which is strange, and I don't know if people are doing that or not. Maybe somebody will comment that. You can comment on Spotify now, which is sweet. On Spotify or YouTube, maybe somebody's going to comment and let me know. That's a little crazy to me. But the big thing is you can use used barrels, which you cannot do with bourbon. And so that's a distinguishing factor, and that is one of the things that kind of moved us towards American Single Malt, is in the industry they were like, first of all, we're going to run into a shortage of barrels, and all this stuff's going to get super expensive for bourbon because it has to be a brand new barrel. Second of all, not great for the environment. We're using these barrels once. Now, we're not throwing them away. Most of the time, they're probably selling them to Scotland to age Scotch in, or Ireland to age Irish whiskey in, or anywhere, because a lot of places allow you to use used barrels. So not just getting thrown away, but it's hey, it'd be nice if we had a spirit that didn't require these brand new barrels. And so that's one of the things. That's not the only reason. I'm sure there's political things way above my head, but that's one of the things that kind of pushed us towards American Single Malts. So very, very important distinguishing factor there, because the thing that you're aging in is going to impart an insane amount of flavor into that whiskey. So it's something you want to look at on the label. It's something you want to learn about. My tablet's making noises again. I'm sorry if you heard that. It won't let me turn the volume down. It keeps trying to shut off if I turn the volume down. So we're making it work. So used barrels. That's a long way of saying you can use used barrels, and it's important that you can use used barrels. Also, 700-liter barrels or less. This is a common thing that you see as well, where there's a limit to the size of the barrels, the capacity of the barrels. That's to make sure you're getting enough contact with that wood that it's imparting flavors into it. Nothing new there. Bottled at 80 proof or more. Another very, 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 very standard for all the categories of whiskey. I'm not aware of any category of whiskey aside from flavored whiskey. I don't even know if they can call it flavored whiskey or if they call it whiskey with artificial flavoring, something like that, where you can go below that proof. Scotch, Irish whiskey, Canadian whiskey, bourbon, 80 proof. 80 proof is the standard. Rye whiskey, So you have to be bottled at 80 proof. That's 40% alcohol by volume or more. And with American Single Malts, you can add caramel coloring to it. You can, which you cannot do with bourbon. But you do have to put it on the label. So you have to disclose that you added coloring to your American Single Malt. So this is like one of those things where you get this 5-year grace period. Because if you were adding caramel coloring and you didn't have it on your label, and you've got 3,000 labels ready to rock, you can't just, they're not just going to make you throw those away, right? So that's one of the reasons for this grace period. I mean, any of these rules it could be, but that's just one really good example, I feel like. And then once again, you can put straight on the label if it's 2 years older or more, which is common as well. You have this with bourbon whiskey, and I believe it's the same with American rye whiskey. So if it's 2 years old, it's going to have straight on the label. Common misconception, and I think this also applies to American Single Malts, I'm just realizing. With bourbon, there's not a minimum age. It needs to be aged in brand new white oak. Could be aged for a day. Or not white oak. Sorry, I say that every time and people are like, it's not white oak, it's any oak. It needs to be aged in brand new oak for bourbon. No minimum age though. So you could age it for a day. It's going to be gross. It's going to taste like moonshine. But you could. 2 years, people think bourbon needs to be at least 2 years old. It needs to be at least 2 years old to put straight on the label. And I think it's the same way for American Single Malts. Except, of course, it doesn't need to be new oak, which I made a big deal about earlier. So it's a common misconception with bourbon. Probably looks like it's going to be the same thing for American Single Malt, which makes sense because they're both American spirits. They follow a very similar set of rules in terms of, your proof bounds, your age bounds, those sorts of things, but they're just two different whiskeys, different recipes, different aging techniques, those sorts of things. So that's all I got about the rules for American Single Malts. I'm really excited. I really think this is going to open up a new thing for the industry. And like I've said, the ones I've had, I've really, really enjoyed. We're about to see 4 of my favorites. Not my 4 favorites, but 4 of my favorites. I really love the wacky finishes and wacky aging barrels. But I'm doing this with no unique aging barrels. I should say, I'm just doing this with flagship bottles. So it's not like Courage and Conviction Cuvée cask. I'm just going to have Courage and Conviction. That way it's just, across the board, somewhat similar. We'll see if I can tell which is which. I might be able to. There's also definitely going to be some proof differences. I just can't avoid it because one of the ones that I wanted to include has a really high proof. I'll probably be able to tell which one it is, hopefully. Otherwise, I'm going to sound really cocky right now. And we're going to compare them. I'm not sure this is going to come out to which one I like the most. I think it's more so going to come out to what each of these has that's unique, because it's really way, way easier to tell when you don't know which one it is that you're drinking. It's way easier to be honest about it. And we're going to use the solo blind. Of course I'm going to use the solo blind. If you don't know what it is an invention of my own making. Myself and my business partner teamed up to come out with the solo blind so that you can do blind tastings on your own. And that's not an ad. That is just me explaining what I'm about to use. Okay, without further ado, I'm going to set this up. So I will be gone for a moment, but for you, it will just be a millisecond. Okay, let's talk about what we're drinking. So I've got 4 different flagship American Single Malts. The one that I would say is not the flagship is this Old Line, and that's because it's their higher proof one. It's their 114 proof. It is the highest proof one in this tasting, which makes me worried I'll be able to know which one it is. But it's really tasty, so I wanted to include it. So we've got Westward Whiskey's American Single Malt. This is their flagship bottle. It is, what proof? 45% alcohol by volume, or 90 proof. Then we've got Old Line's Navy Strength 114 proof American Single Malt. As the name would suggest, it is 114 proof. We've got Minden Mills American Single Malt Whiskey, and I don't know what proof it is. It's 94, so it's down there around the Westward. And then we've got, from Virginia Distillery Company, their Courage and Conviction American Single Malt Whiskey, which is 46% alcohol by volume, or 92 proof. So mostly the mid to low 90s? Yeah, low 90s. Mostly the low 90s. And then we got Old Line sitting up here like 20 proof above the rest of them. So that's just an unfortunate circumstance of doing this blind tasting, so it couldn't be avoided. I had to have Old Line. I like it. I really enjoy it. It goes great with cigars, let me just tell you. So we're going to do a blind tasting. So what I'm going to do is I've got all 4 of these loaded up, and they have a little label with them to tell me which is which. I'm going to spin it, and I can't see them as I'm spinning them, for those of you who are not watching the video version. And I'm going to spin it so I don't know which is which. I'm going to scramble them once again to make it even harder so that now I won't even know the order that they go in. Make sure I got it loaded properly. Even I mess it up sometimes. There we go. And then I'm going to scramble them and spin again, which will make it even harder for me. I'd have to be an absolute super genius to know which is which at this point. Okay, thank you, Solo Blind. Go ahead and get out of here so that I can do this tasting. Let me push it off camera so it's out of your guys' way, or at least to the edge of the camera. Boom. Okay, here's what I'm expecting. Let me tell you, so that I can look like an idiot when I'm wrong. Here's what I'm expecting. I think Westward and Courage and Conviction are going to be the most similar, but I think there's still a difference. So I think Courage and Conviction is going to be the most rich and sort of fruity. Rich is really the best word for it. It really just covers your palate with like a rich sweetness. So I think that's what's going to give it away. Old Line, obviously the proof's going to give it away, but it's also aged in brand new virgin American oak, the same way that bourbon would be. And I think that it has a really strong oakiness. It's got a little bit of a tannic flavor, which I just love. It goes great with the cigar. I think that's also going to give it away. The Minden Mill is a unique one. It has what I call a malty funk to it. It reminds me a lot of Monkey Shoulder, which was like the first scotch I ever bought a bottle of, where it has this kind of funkiness to it. It doesn't have as much as like the orange peel and the citrus that Monkey Shoulder has, but it does have that earthy funkiness that I love. So I'm hoping that that gives it away. And then Westward reminds me of Courage and Conviction a bit, but Westward has this flair to all of their whiskeys where it has this kind of like spicy, but not like painful spice, especially because this one's only 90 proof. Just like this kind of like cracked pepper baking spice thing to go with that rich sweetness, which dries it up a little bit. So I think the Courage and Conviction is going to be a lot richer, and the Westward's going to have a little bit more zing to it. All four of these I should add, so like I love all four of these, and all four are great for different moods. If you want something sweet and desserty, Courage and Conviction. If you want a little bit more zing than that, you want a little bit of pop, Westward. If you want an earthy kind of malty funk, Minden. And if you want just like full bore, you want the high proof, you want the pop, and you want that oaky kind of tannic flavor, Old Line. So I drink them all depending on my mood. So it's been a while since I've drank them, so I hope I don't make myself look dumb. Let's do a blind tasting. I'm going to do a nose, and then I'll come back in a couple milliseconds for you guys and let you know what I'm thinking. If I could get this just from the nose, I'd be like so excited, but I'm probably way off. But here's my guess. So on the nose, I'm thinking the first one on my left is Minden. I think the next one over, what did I think that was? Courage and Conviction. The next one over, I think Old Line, and then the last one, I think, is Westward. The order is not important. I just pulled them off the Solo Blind. It's not like a ranking. But that's my guess, based on those notes that I gave you before. I'm going to go through, do some tasting, and let you know what I'm thinking. Okay, I'm thinking I'm probably right. Of course I think that. I do want to clarify, because anybody who's listening who's had these whiskeys is probably screaming at their phone right now, dude, these aren't that similar. Why are you impressed with yourself? And here's a couple reasons. First of all, I want to be clear. These aren't that similar. So I should be able to tell them apart. I might not. I should be able to. So that is absolutely the truth. I'm excited about it, though, because first of all, I've just done all of Dry January, which can help your palate. It can help it be a little bit less burnt out. So I'm hoping this should be a relatively easy tasting. Second of all, blind tastings with things that are different and are noticeably different can be really good, because it can be really good at you, first of all, recognizing the different flavors, and second of all, if you've been struggling with your blind tastings, you've been not getting them right, even though the goal is not really to get them right, but if you're trying to get them right, if you're trying to practice your ability to tell what something is, then doing something super different is good. It can really help you flex those muscles a little bit. It's kind of like starting with lightweight when you're going to the gym, something like that. So I do think I'm right. But I realized I only said what Old Line was aged in, and I had my little foot in the mouth earlier when I said only aged or no finishes, because I didn't mean that. I meant flagship. So let's talk about what the finishes are. I noticed it on the back of the Courage and Conviction bottle, and I'm like, hey, I should probably talk about this. So Courage and Conviction is aged a minimum of 3 years okay. There's a whole bunch on the back here. It's aged a minimum of 3 years. This 100% malted barley whiskey is matured in former sherry, cuvee, and bourbon casks. So it's a blend of those different casks. And I do also have just their cuvee cask, which is also delicious, but I rest my case. Old Line, as I mentioned, I believe it's only aged in 100% malted barley, aged in virgin American oak. Westward, I think, from what I'm seeing on their website, is also aged in charred American oak barrels. It doesn't say anything. That's what it says, charred American oak barrels. It doesn't say anything about any previous spirits being held in it, which is interesting because I do feel like it's got this real fruity flavor to it. And then Minden Mill is, I just saw it, aged 5 years in American and French oak casks. So the only one that's got all the different finishing going on is actually Courage and Conviction. I thought for sure Westward did because it's so fruity, but I guess not. So here's what I'm getting so far, though, because it is a little different than I said it was going to be. Number one, I'm pretty sure is Minden Mill. I think. I should have paid more attention to proof, I'm just realizing, because it could be Old Line, but I think it's Minden Mill. It has that malty funk that I mentioned. Something I noticed, which I'm sad that I noticed it. This is why we do blind tastings. You notice notes that you didn't think you were going to notice. I noticed a little bit of a clove taste, which for some people, you're going to be like, why are you sad about that? That's phenomenal. I personally don't like clove very much. So I'm gonna obviously do more tasting of it. It was the first one that I tasted in this blind tasting, so I'm not panicking yet, not full panic, because I love Minden Mill. But now that I've noticed that, it's one of those where once you notice them, sometimes you can't not notice it. If you have a whiskey and you notice a note that you don't like, sometimes it's like a metallic-y note for me. It's like I can't drink it anymore. It's like, oh, that's all I'm gonna taste now. None of these have that so far, thank goodness. But I'm hoping that clove isn't as prevalent as it was on that first sip. So I should put these in the order that I think they're in, and it's almost in that order. Can you still see these on camera? Let me look here. I'm gonna move them over to make sure you can. So I think it's Minden Mill. Then I think it's Courage and Conviction. It is like super duper fruity. It's dessert. It's rich, like I said. I think that's what it is. Old Line, something I've noticed with Old Line, and I've talked to Adam about this on my other podcast, Perfect Pairing, is it has a real brown sugary flavor, which is really tasty. It comes from that American oak for sure. And that oak comes through, you get a little bit of that cinnamon, but the brown sugar is really prevalent there. And then the Westward, it is more different than Courage and Conviction than I thought it was. So I could definitely be mixing the two up because it's like they're two not totally different, but they're pretty different. So maybe I just have them backwards, but I think Courage and Conviction is the sweeter of the two. Westward definitely has that more dry flavor, a little bit more zing. Definitely good if you're wanting something to not really weigh your palate down, because the Courage and Conviction is good, but it's super desserty. That's what I'm getting so far. I'm going to go through one more time and really confirm, really make sure that I think that I'm right before I go revealing them. And then we'll talk about which one you should buy. And I think it really depends. It depends on what you're looking for. We'll talk about that a little bit. All right, I'm locking in. I'm probably biased because it's initially what I said off the nose, but I think I was right. So I think number one is Minden Mill. I think number two is Courage and Conviction. I think number three is Old Line. And I think number four is Westward. I'm going to reveal, and if I'm not right, I should say, we'll reorganize. But then I'm going to talk about what I think you should, who I think should be buying each of these. So number one, I thought it was Minden Mill. It is Minden Mill. Okay. Off to a good start. Number two, I thought was Courage and Conviction. This is the one I could be getting wrong, but I really hope I'm right. It is Westward. Wow. Okay, I got some stuff to talk about with that. I am so mind blown. I confirmed my own bias when I read about Westward's aging. I wonder if there is some finishes going on with that Westward. Okay, anyhow, we'll talk about that in a second. Old Line, of course, and then that makes this Courage and Conviction that I thought was Westward. I am mind blown right now. We're going to talk about that. Let me reorganize these bottles. Gosh, nobody likes getting things wrong. Nobody likes to be wrong. But I'll tell you something, when you're wrong in a blind tasting, it's like one of those lessons that sticks with you. You learn so much. I get excited about it, but I should probably be more embarrassed than I currently am. Okay. I'm going to do a quick tasting of the Courage and Conviction and the Westward side by side. Okay, this is, and I wish I knew if they do finish the Westward, because it just says American oak. It just says heavily toasted, lightly charred. So that's interesting. Maybe make sure I didn't mix these up, or I mean put them back in the wrong order. Okay, we're still good. Okay, so here's why this is so important, because, and this is also why I was worried I might have them mixed up. Here's why. The first time I tried Westward, I thought it had a little bit more kick to it. I had only had Courage and Conviction at that point, I think. I had Courage and Conviction, and I had a couple of other brands that tasted nothing like Courage and Conviction. They were different, and they weren't really in my wheelhouse. So then when I went to Westward, when I tried Westward, I should say, I thought, this is a little bit drier. And I hadn't had them side by side. I just had them separately. I'm like, this Westward's got a little bit of a dryness to it. And I established that bias right off the rip. And so that was one of the reasons that I was like, I wonder if I got these mixed up, but I was so confident. So that Westward in this tasting for sure was more rich. The Courage and Conviction was a little bit more dry. The Westward does, and this should have given it away, it does have some of that malty funk that Minden Mill has, but it had been so long since I had Courage and Conviction, I was like, maybe I missed it last time I had it. I don't know. Wow. Yeah, no, I'm floored right now. So here's who I think should be having each of these then. So I'll recap what I think they taste like, and then I'll tell you who I think should be having them. So first up is Minden Mill. Let me make sure. That is in the camera view, so I'm going to hold it here. Minden Mill American Single Malt. This has a definite malty, funky earthiness to it. I read on the back there that it said coffee notes, and I thought that's a good one. It definitely has like a coffee note to it, and I think like it's like a dark roast coffee where it has that earthy kind of flavor to it. And I think somebody who should be drinking that is somebody, of course, if you like those notes I just described, but I think if you like the scotches, not a peated scotch, but if you like scotches that have that funkiness. And if you've had them and if you like them, you probably know what I'm talking about. It's where they have this sort of, what's the right word even for it, honestly? Because like mildew is not the right word. There are some whiskeys that have a mildew flavor, and that's not it. It's almost like wet grain, because it's not like it hasn't grown mildew or mold yet. It's just like wet, damp grain, I guess is the best way to describe it. If you like that kind of a funk, Minden Mill is for you. Now, I did notice, after I noticed that clove flavor, I couldn't unsee it. However, it's not as strong on the palate. You get a lot of that coffee and that earth on the palate. The cloviness comes through on the finish, and it's distinct for me. Like, I really noticed it. After that glass shattered, there was no going back. So it definitely has a little bit of a cloviness to it on the finish, specifically. After you swallow it, or in my case, I was spitting it out, it just, as the fumes evaporate on your palate, clove comes through strong. Westward, that I thought was Courage and Conviction, amazing, by the way, can't believe this, was so much richer than the other three here. So it just covered my palate with a body, with a stone fruit flavor. It's peachy. I think it is a really good dessert one. It's got this real rich sweetness to it. If you want something that's going to cover your palate, I would compare this a little bit to an Angel's Envy rye, where it's got that really sweet flavor to it. It doesn't taste like it, but in like terms of the richness and the sweetness. I'm floored. I'm wondering if they do use, because it just says American oak. It doesn't say new American oak. Does it say on the bottle? I'm just floored if there is no other, like if there was no spirits in the barrels that they aged in. But anyhow, it has this real fruity, desserty, sweet character to it. And then it does have this little zing of spice right at the end, but surprisingly not as much as the Courage and Conviction, which we're about to talk about. So, Westward, I would say if you want something sweet, if you want something desserty. And they've also got all kinds of other, like their cask strength and stout finish, things like that. But I'm just talking about these bottles. Old Line. If you're a bourbon drinker getting into American Single Malts, I should probably make a short form reel about this so I can tell more people, project it to a larger audience here. Old Line is the way to go, in my opinion, especially this 114. If you're drinking a lot of cask strength bourbons, it's 114 proof. It's got the brown sugar. It's got the oak. It's got a little bit of tannin. The difference is, with a bourbon, you've got a lot of that caramel sweetness. You've got a lot of that white sugar, that forward kind of candy flavor with like the barrel flavor. The old line, the malt kind of lets it come through as more of a brown sugar, a little bit more molassesy. Another similarity to bourbon that I noticed, I looked down. I'm cheating because I'm looking at the back of these bottles, but I looked down and I saw the dried fruit on the back of the bottle. And I don't normally get it, but when I looked at it and I saw it, I was like, definitely there's some like raisin there. So maybe I was brainwashed. Maybe I'm biased. I don't know. But I did get it. And then Courage and Conviction blew my mind. I think I'm going to taste it one more time before I even say what I'm thinking about it. But it blew my mind. First of all, actually, I'm going to taste it again to confirm. But I think almost a good thing. Because I almost used to think Courage and Conviction was too sweet. And in this tasting, the one that I thought was Courage and Conviction, which was Westward, I was like, well, that's not too sweet. That's sweet, but it's not too sweet. And then the one that I thought was Westward, which is Courage and Conviction, totally was not too sweet. So that's at least good. But I still like all these brands for different moods. But I'm going to try Courage and Conviction one more time. Wow. When I have that by itself, it is so much more full-bodied. It's got a little bit more dryness to it. It almost has some of the coffee notes that the Minden Mill has. And then one that I remember Amanda Beckwith mentioning when she was on the podcast. And at the time I was like, oh my gosh, that's such a good descriptor. One that comes through even stronger now that I've done this blind is the cocoa flavor. And so it's a little bit drier than I thought it was, which surprisingly makes Courage and Conviction the one that I think you should have if you want some of those fruity stone fruit notes, but you don't want it so sweet. I thought it was going to be totally opposite, but Courage and Conviction, it's got a little bit of tannin to it. It's got a little bit of oakiness to it. And it's got just this like spice, this kind of zing to it, a little bit of black pepper. I'm glad I did this because I would have totally picked those in opposite moods. And that's amazing to me. Like I think like, for example, for me on a summer day, I don't want things too sweet because it's hot outside. I would have picked Westward. Now I will pick Courage and Conviction. But after dinner with a dessert or watching a movie, I would have picked Courage and Conviction because I wanted that sweetness. Now I know I would actually pick Westward. I'm glad. This is why we do this. I'm 2 for 2 on blind tastings, just knocking my socks off on restarting the Whiskey Noobs podcast. I'm so happy. I'm happy. I look like an idiot, and that's okay. I'm glad I look like an idiot because, listen, everybody's palate's different, and I really want to get back to hammering like the welcoming, approachable message that I used to hammer home because, especially with bourbon prices getting so expensive and things like that, I feel like we're seeing it's a little bit less approachable again. I could ramble and talk about this all day long, but the reason I'm so gussied up is I have somewhere to be later, and I gotta make sure I'm keeping myself on track because we still have 3 questions we got to talk about from our patrons. So patrons, especially if you're listening and you're already on the Patreon, my patrons can always send messages to me and ask me questions for the podcast, and I will record them and I'll put them here. But I also throw reminders in the Discord sometimes. So there's a Discord channel specifically for the Q&A. If you don't want to throw your question in there, I totally get it. I'm the type that I worry about things like that. I get socially anxious. So you can also just message them to me. You can private message on Discord, private message on Patreon. Whatever it is, just make sure that I confirm and say, okay, I'll answer that, because if I don't, then I might have missed it, especially Patreon's notifications are a little wacky sometimes. So, anyhow, that's me saying patrons can ask questions whenever you guys would like, and we've got 3 of them to go through in this episode. So, the first one is, adding drops of water to bourbon. How many, which bourbons, what proof, and how much does 1 drop of water bring down proof, etc.? I am going to try to consult my scripts here because I know I did an episode on it and I should have had this ready. This is on me. Scripts, old. Old. Go to the old scripts. What does water do to whiskey? Okay, episode 145. I go a little bit more in depth into what water does to whiskey, but I'll talk a little bit more generally here about adding drops of water to bourbon. How many drops? Which bourbons? What proof? And how much does 1 drop of water bring down proof? And they said, etc. So just in general, all about drops of water. So I recommend you go listen to episode 145 if you haven't already. But let's talk about it. So The first question is, how many drops of water do you add to your bourbon? They're specifically asking about bourbon here. The answer is however many you want. There is no perfect amount of water in a bourbon, and it's going to be based on whatever the distiller thinks is the best. So they probably picked the amount of water that they think is the best when they proofed it down, especially if it's not cask strength, especially those ones that are at a real weird proof. They're at like 107 and it's not cask strength. They probably picked what they thought was the best proof for the flavor profile. That being said, everybody's different. Everybody's palate's different. So you're going to want to just like add a drop of water, taste it, do maybe a full tasting with it, add another drop of water. Slowly work your way into it and see what you like the most. This is the most helpful metaphor, in my opinion, for adding water to whiskey. I came up with this metaphor and the whole world caught on fire because people hated me. But here's what it is. Water in whiskey is like salt on food. Here's what I mean by that. I mean, adding some totally enhances the flavor. There is a perfect amount for your palate. Some people like more salt. Some people like less salt. If you're going to a fancy restaurant, I can almost guarantee you the chef put the exact amount of salt into the recipe and onto the food that they think is the best. They think that's going to just nail your palate the best. In the same way, water can enhance the flavor of whiskey. Some water will almost certainly open it up and you'll be able to notice new flavors within the whiskey. Too much water, much like too much salt, can totally ruin the flavor. It can make your whiskey taste watered down. It can bring out notes that you don't like. Just like salt can make your food too salty. It can make it just taste funky. It can make it taste weird. In the same way that the chef adds the perfect amount of salt at a fancy restaurant, a distiller or blender adds the perfect amount of salt perfect amount of water. I hope they're not salting their whiskey. They add the perfect amount of water to the whiskey that they think is going to be just the best. They think this presents it perfectly. And I had a bunch of people saying that is a terrible metaphor because salt enhances the flavor of whiskey. Okay. Maybe I did drink more of that than I thought I did. Because salt enhances the flavor of food, that's a bad metaphor. And I said, no, it's not, because water can enhance the flavor of whiskey. And much like salt, if you do too much, it's going to ruin it. And people say, well, if you add salt to a meal you get from a restaurant, it's going to enhance the flavor. And to that I say, then the chef didn't do their job because they were supposed to add the right amount of salt to perfectly enhance the flavor. That's the point that I'm trying to drive home here. And the reason I'm trying to drive home that point is it's such an easy metaphor. It works so well because we're so used to salting our food or not salting our food or adding pepper to our food or whatever it might be. You get the idea. Some people like really salty food. Some people don't. It's the same idea. And so it's the same way with whiskey or with bourbon like you asked about. It depends. So you're going to want to add some until you think it's the right amount. And then you'll know, every time I have insert bourbon here, I like 3 droplets of water in it. I find that that's the perfect proof. It opens it up just enough. Which bourbons? All of them. Every bourbon is going to have a different proof point. Every whiskey is going to have a different proof point where you find it's the best. I believe it was the guys from Borrowed Page that I had on where they release it a different proof every time because they're like, we try it at cask strength. We try it at 115. We try it at 110 all the way down to 80. We see what we like the most. So that's what they like the most. You should do the same. Now, what proof? You can calculate what proof it's going to make the bourbon if you do your volume measurements. You could say, I got this much of this proof, this much of zero proof, which is water, and now it's watered down to this proof. You can do that. It's like a volume calculation, like a dilution equation like you might have done back in chemistry class. It's the same equation. I'm not going to run through it right now, but you can do it. And how much does 1 drop of water bring down proof? Depends on how much whiskey's in there. So if you've got an ounce of whiskey, 1 drop of water will bring down the proof, X proof, depending on what proof it is, If you've got 2 ounces, now you need to do 2 drops of water to bring down the proof the same amount. So like I said, you can do that math. It's based you could base on the amount of milliliters you're putting in. So if you really were curious, you could do exactly 1 ounce, which is exactly a certain amount of milliliters that I don't remember off the top of my head. And then you could put in a milliliter of water at a time. And then you could know what your proof is. Great question though, because that is an underappreciated art is adding just the right amount of water to your whiskey for your palate. It's underappreciated because it can really enhance your experience, which is ironically, hey, shameless plug here. I didn't even plan this. That's why I include water droplets in the Whiskey Noobs starter kit that I give to our patrons. So if you're a $10 patron, you get one. And if you're a $20 patron, you get one. Novice noobs and expert noobs, you get water droplets in your little starter kit that I provide because I feel like it's underappreciated. Okay, that's enough about that. Next thing. They said a big question right now is the bourbon boom. Are we watching the bust? Brown-Forman layoff, MGP stock went down from 140 to 136 or 140 to 36 in a short time. Is the market swinging? So I'm not up to date on all the market stats. I just feel like I'm plugged in because I see what happens to the bourbon market on my page, right? So like if people are way less interested in whiskey, then I see a decrease in my following, like increasing and with my likes and things. If people are less interested in bourbon, I see more engagement on things that aren't bourbon when I do videos about other things. So I feel like I do have a little bit of a finger on the pulse, but I want to be clear, I'm not like a market advisor. I don't know for sure. Here's what I think is happening. I don't think the bourbon hobby, the bourbon enthusiasm, any of that is going anywhere, to be totally honest. I think the people who were only in it for the rare stuff, you know, like they heard about it, they thought it was so cool, they got into hunting, totally fine, I get that. I think they're falling off a little bit because it's one of those things where if you're only in it for like that gamble of hunting, it loses its luster eventually. So I think we're seeing a little bit less of that. And I think we're seeing a little bit less of the buying bourbon as like a status symbol. I think the people who are into it for the art form, the American culture, those sorts of things, I don't think we're going anywhere. I can speak for myself and the other people that I know. I think it's alive and it's well. But what effect is that having on the market? I think it's going to affect the secondary market for sure. I think it's going to affect the price gouging that happens in states that aren't controlled, where you can have whatever price you want for whatever. I think it's going to lower those prices a little bit, which I think is good news for a lot of people. The layoffs are definitely sad. And I think that the layoffs are a result of bourbon lovers may not be going anywhere, but our tastes are shifting. I think a lot of people are starting to say, hey, when I get over $60, if it's not a special occasion bottle, I'm probably not buying it. I think a lot of people are starting to look at it that way, where they're like, from 0 to 60, there's a gradient. From 0, like for me, my low, middle, and top shelf probably goes from 0 to like 90 maximum. And I think that's a lot of people, right? Like 90 is the top of my top shelf. If I'm going above that, it's either a really special occasion or it's something that I'll only be able to try once, like stuff like that. I think a lot of people are starting to look at it that way. So I think I know from the whiskeys that I've been asked to review and just like I do get some notifications of like, hey, so-and-so came out with this or that, or they're going to come out with this or that. Definitely, I think we're seeing the prices shift downward. And I think that's causing a lot of the layoffs because it used to be, you know, you could pick your honey barrels, you could age them just a couple more years, and you could slap a 3 times price tag on there. I think those days are going away a little bit. And those are profit margin. Those are really high profit margin bottles. And so I think that's why we're seeing some of the layoffs, some of the stock drop, those sorts of things. My hope is that the hobby is still alive and well. And I think it is, really. And I hope we're not seeing a bubble pop. I hope we're just seeing a bubble deflate a little bit. And I think most of the bubble is either the rare stuff or the craft guys who were gouging their prices because they had a good story. I always award some bonus points to craft businesses, especially small. Like I like small businesses. I like people who are really trying to make it work. So I award an extra $10 or $20. But for sure, we were getting into this weird territory where it was like, yeah, we're really small. You should pay triple what you would normally pay. And that I think we're seeing an end of as well. It was an inflated industry. We're going to see it. I'm not too worried about the hobby going away. I'm sad for those who lost their jobs, but I hope as we shift into this lower price range, we're going to see it kind of pick up again, because then you're going to see people buying more and being like, oh, well, now instead of buying this $150 bottle, I can try 3 $50 bottles. So I'm hoping we're going to see some of that, but it's going to adjust. That's for sure. The last question is, have I tried Sagamore 9-year-old, and what are my thoughts on the overall Sagamore line? So Sagamore Spirits, I believe it's in Baltimore, Maryland. They're big on ryes. I have not had any of their stuff, unfortunately, but here I do have something to say about it. I think they're probably a good brand. And I say that because a lot of reviewers that I trust and that I like their opinions on things, they all tend to like them. I can't believe I haven't had it yet. I'm going to have to try to get a bottle. They all tend to like Sagamore, or at least a few of the key ones that I know. And the other thing is, I don't just see them post about Sagamore in like a flurry. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I think it's Sagamore. I don't see them just post about it in a flurry where it's like this new brand and it's exciting and I love it. I see them post about it and not post for a while and post about it again, which to me tells me they really like it, because it's coming back to top of mind later on and they're talking about it. So I definitely think that it's probably a really good brand. I haven't had it though, so I can't officially endorse it. That's just based on people that I trust. So hopefully that's helpful. I should get a couple bottles of that and try a couple of their different offerings. Okay, those are the only Q&As that we've got for this episode, guys, and I really am going to have to hit the road here soon. So thank you guys all for listening. I hope you learned something from me being super duper wrong on this blind tasting. We're going to do more of them, and I'll see you guys all next month. One more time, please consider going and checking out that Patreon page. You're going to get stuff when you sign up. You're going to get entered into giveaways as well. You get free stuff, and then you also get entered into giveaways. So go check it out. Thank you guys all for listening. I'll leave you with learn to drink, drink to learn. Hi there. If you're still listening to this, then I'm going to assume that you enjoyed the show. So please consider taking a moment to leave a 5-star rating or review and subscribe on whatever platform it is that you're watching/listening to this on. And as always, please, please, please drink responsibly. Cheers.